Miracle on 34th Street. New York City woke early that Thanksgiving morning. Cold winds swept between skyscrapers, steam curled from subway grates, and thousands of people bundled in scarves and mittens pressed along the streets to see the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. Children perched on fathers' shoulders. Vendors sold hot chocolate that steamed in the air, and brass bands warmed their instruments with breath clouds rising like smoke. At the end of the parade route stood Doris Walker, brisk, efficient, and determined to see that every float moved on time. Doris was known as the woman who didn't let sentiment interfere with responsibility. She loved her daughter, Susan, fiercely, but she raised her with no fairy tales, no fantasies, no silly dreams. Life, she believed, was hard enough without false hope. But that morning, even Doris felt a flicker of panic. The man hired to play Santa Claus had arrived with the unmistakable smell of holiday spirits, and not the holy kind. His beard was crooked, his eyes glassy, and he was swaying like a ship in heavy seas. Just as Doris wondered how she could save the parade, she turned and froze. Standing beside her was an elderly gentleman with a long white beard, a round, kindly face, and a red suit that fit him as naturally as winter fits the North Pole. His eyes were bright. His manner was calm. When he spoke, his voice carried warmth like a Christmas Eve fireplace. "Ma'am," he said gently, "your Santa appears to have partaken too freely. Might I be of assistance?" His name, he explained, was Kris Kringle, and the moment he stepped onto the sleigh, lifting his hand in a jolly wave, the entire crowd reacted with a roar of delight. People leaned forward, children shrieked with joy. Even the police officers glancing his way whispered, "Now that looks like Santa." When the parade ended, Macy's executives, hastily summoned, begged Kris to serve as the store's official Santa. He agreed with a smile, saying simply, "If I can help bring a bit of joy, I'm happy to do it." The Santa of the people. From the first day, Kris sat upon the red velvet throne in Macy's toy department. Something magical happened. Children from every corner of the city stood in long lines to talk to him. Unlike other Santas, Kris didn't hurry them along or hand them generic candy canes. He listened, truly listened. He leaned in, asked questions, and knew how to soften a shy voice or calm a frightened one. One little girl, Dutch and unable to speak English, was trembling at the sight of Santa. Immediately, Kris began speaking fluent Dutch, singing a children's song she knew from home. Her mother burst into tears, whispering, "No one in America has spoken Dutch to her since we arrived." Word spread, and more children came. And then something utterly unheard of occurred. When a mother asked about a toy Macy's didn't carry, Kris told her exactly where she could find it, at Gimbap, Macy's rival store. When Macy's executives heard he was telling customers to shop elsewhere, they marched toward him with steam practically coming from their ears, but they were stopped dead in their tracks by a stream of delighted customers praising Macy's for its honesty. Before the day ended, Macy's president issued a stunning declaration. "If Macy's doesn't have a toy a child wants, we'll tell the parents exactly where to find it, even if it's at Gimbap." Newspapers ran the story, customers flocked, Macy's image soared, all because of Kris Kringle, the house of reason in the girl who didn't believe. Back at home, Doris's daughter, Susan, was watching the world's strangest thing unfold. She was beginning to like this Santa Claus. Susan had been raised with practical rules: no fairies, no giants, no Santa Claus. The world was what you could see, touch, and understand, but Kris spoke to her politely, kindly, as though she were an equal, not a child. He taught her reindeer names, showed her how to blow bubble gum properly, told her stories that didn't sound like pretend but like memories. And yet, Susan remained firm. "I don't believe in Santa. Mommy says he isn't real." Kris gave her a patient smile. "That's perfectly all right, my dear. Faith is a lovely thing, but it must never be forced. Only, sometimes wonderful things happen when good hearts dare to hope." Susan wanted to believe. She really did. The spark that started the fire. But not everyone saw Kris with affection. Mr. Sawyer, Macy's personnel man, disliked him immediately. Sawyer was the type who felt powerful only when making others feel small. He convinced the store psychiatrist that Chris might be mentally unstable. After all, what sane man claimed to be Santa Claus? A minor scuffle gave Sawyer exactly what he wanted. A store employee teasing Chris pushed too far with insults, and Chris, frustrated, tapped him lightly with his cane. Though harmless, it was enough for Sawyer to cry dangerous and recommend institutionalization. Before Chris knew it, he was in Bellevue Hospital, confused, heartsick, and wondering whether his mission to spread joy had failed. The courtroom of belief. But Chris wasn't alone. Fred Gailey, a young lawyer who admired Chris's goodness and who had long admired Doris, took up his case. He insisted that the hearing should not be about mental health, but about identity. Does this man believe he is Santa Claus because he's deluded? Fred asked, or because he is, in fact, Santa Claus? The judge, a weary man under political pressure, soon found himself presiding over the strangest legal question in American history. Is Kris Kringle the real Santa Claus? Witnesses came forward, children, parents, Chris's fellow workers, all describing his kindness, wisdom, warmth, and uncanny knowledge. But the evidence was thin, logic was thin, it came down to faith. And then, just when all seemed lost, a postal worker burst into Fred's office. Gailey, you won't believe this. We've just sorted through thousands of letters addressed to Santa Claus from all over the country. We got tired of them cluttering up the post office, so we looked up where Santa Claus is, and we delivered them all to Kris Kringle. When the court reconvened, postal workers wheeled in cart after cart of Santa letters, dumping them on the judge's bench. The courtroom gasped. Fred stepped forward. Your Honor, the United States government has just delivered every one of these letters to Kris Kringle. They acknowledge he is Santa Claus. If the U.S. Post Office, an official branch of our federal government, recognizes Mr. Kringle as Santa Claus, this court has no right to say otherwise. The judge, staring at mountains of letters addressed to Santa and delivered to Chris, slowly raised his gavel. This court finds that Kris Kringle is Santa Claus. The room erupted in cheers. Chris was free. A Christmas house and a child's faith. Christmas morning came with a quiet snowfall. Doris and Susan met Fred for a drive through the suburbs. Susan was subdued. Her one Christmas wish, a home of her own, seemed impossible. But then Chris, who had left earlier with a wink, nudged Fred to take a particular turn, then another, then down a winding lane, and there, standing proud and warm with a wreath on the door, was a little white house with green shutters. Susan gasped. Her eyes widened. She scrambled out of the car, running up the walkway. "Mommy! Mommy! It's our house! It's our house!" Inside, the rooms were small but cozy. A fireplace waited for stockings. A swing hung beneath an oak tree in the backyard. Doris stood, speechless. Susan looked up at her and whispered, "I believe now. I believe." Then she ran through the halls, laughing, and, in the corner of the living room, leaning ever so casually against the wall, stood Kris Kringle's cane. Doris took Fred's hand. "Faith," she whispered, "is believing in things even when common sense tells you not to." The house was theirs. Their family began. And somewhere in the falling snow, Kris Kringle walked on, bringing miracles to those who dared to believe.